Previously, I made 2 feature-length videos about Serious Sam 4 and Serious Sam 3. In order to continue with the canonical timeline, this feature would contain the 2 episodes that make up Serious Sam 1. Instead of going through the game step by step, I'm focusing more on its trivia. This may be a letdown to some, but I believe it's a better approach in general. Prior to this new direction, I managed to get a completed script for the intro, story, and first 7 levels of the game. One of my plans was to go into each level using a different release of Serious Sam, from the alpha version up to the Nintendo Switch, leaving no existing re-release or port untouched. Let me introduce Roman Rybarek and Davor Hunsky. They became inspired to create video games after learning about their mutual friend's brother, who created a game for the ZX Spectrum. They were shocked at how much money the game made. The two then created their own small company in Zagreb, Croatia. Thus, Croteam was born. Davor Hunsky describes their first efforts as garage development. They lacked in size, faculty, and there were even Croatian army obligations. However, over time, they managed to recruit more people to keep things steady. They made a couple games in their early years, but none of this would be as ambitious as the eventual Serious Sam. Being unable to afford a 3D engine, which often sold for nearly $500,000 at the time, they would have to create their own. So they did. Escape 3D was its name, initially a 2.5D engine, until their competition became more intimidating. They would update the engine many times over before it became the famous Serious engine that we know of today. In the Flesh, as it was initially titled, was a horrific, narrative-heavy dungeon shooter with 4 chapters. This game is still largely a mystery to us, but we do know it was a stark contrast to what the game would become. Some confirmed enemies for In the Flesh were Catmen, Headmen, Knights, Sharks, Cybermen, Cyborgs, Mammoth, Harpies, and the Devil. The team came to an agreement. Most shooters on the market felt too confined. They liked the idea of a setting with large open areas. So in 1998, they scrapped In the Flesh for a new game that would emphasize large, colorful, and bright environments. Inspirations for this game came from arcade classics like Commando, Smash TV, and Galaxian. Home games like Doom, Duke Nukem, and Tomb Raider have also been cited. On occasion, they'll also mention novels and films like The Fifth Element, Dune, and Star Wars. Roman Rybarek then came up with a new title for the game, featuring a protagonist known as Serious Sam. He would be presented as a parody character, poking fun at how serious first-person shooters were at the time. Croteam as a whole didn't really like the idea, nor the appearance of their character, which may be why he's gone through so many facelifts over the years. Eventually, Serious Sam did manage to grow on them. Serious Sam would feature dozens of enemies on screen at once, complementing its huge open spaces. Transitioning from In the Flesh to Serious Sam, many of the game's enemies would go through design changes. Some went through several before the final game was released. Roman Rybarek wrote the game's design document in the year 2000. This created the Serious Sam universe, establishing key story elements. On the way, the cast of enemies would have their names changed to fit with the new lore. The document was sent to somewhere between 20 and 30 publishers, along with an alpha build of the game. But sadly, none took interest in the game at this time. Croteam wasn't about to give up though. They went on to create one highly polished level to send out as a demo. This was Karnak, featuring the famous theme by Damian Mrvunitz, who went on to create the soundtrack for First Encounter. He's had heavy involvement in most Serious Sam games' soundtracks since. The demo, known as Public Test 1, was released on May 30th, 2000. The demo lands them an interview with the popular gaming journalist site Old Man Murray. This got the attention of Mike Wilson, the CEO of publisher God Games. A publishing deal was then made between them and Croteam on July 28, 2000. As a result, several changes were made to the game. Initially composed of 40 levels, Serious Sam will now have just 15. Many of their ideas from this time would end up scrapped, but a lot of it would end up in their later released Serious Sam Second Encounter. During the summer of 2000, the demo became GameSpy's #1 most downloaded file of the season. This amount of attention got others talking. One of the more profound reactions would come from George Broussard of 3D Realms. He would remark on several occasions about how the game is a novelty at best. Croteam spent 12-hour workdays on Serious Sam, with few breaks in between. Their plan was to make the Sirius engine worthy of being licensed by other game developers, as this would result in great profits for the company. They suggested a price between $50,000 to $200,000 to license it, which was actually quite cheap compared to other 3D engines of the time. Prior to release, the Sirius engine was tried critically against the competition, where it was found that it lacked several important features that you'd find in other 3D engines from the time. As such, while it was licensed a few times, this probably didn't meet Croteam's expectation. On December 15th, 2000, they released their second public test. This version was more optimized, but generally meant to test out the game's netcode. The famous cooperative mode exists at large due to the work of Alan Ladavat. Final preparations for Serious Sam took just over a year. Sadly, most of their first 3 years of work on the project would be scrapped in the end. The game was released on March 21st, 2001 as a budget big box release in retail stores. Towards the end of the year, GameSpot awarded the first encounter with their Game of the Year award. Croteam's hard work clearly paid off and put the naysayers in their place. Closely rivaled with their second encounter mission pack, the two games are often considered the best in the series. These days, especially with a gold release and Xbox port combined as a standalone game, most will agree that the first and second encounters make up Serious Sam 1. Prior to those releases, a third encounter was actually planned. It would contain the missions leading up to Sam's final fight with the series antagonist Mental. This was scrapped in favor of the full-fledged sequel, Serious Sam 2. Nobody's 100% sure why this happened. One theory is that it had to do with a publishing agreement with 2K Games. After all, their previous publisher, God Games, fell under after the release of Second Encounter. One other theory is that Croteam didn't want the Serious Sam series to end so soon, because once Sam defeats Mental, there's nothing left to do and nowhere else to take the story. This is Queen Hatshepsut's temple. Before the trivia, there's a bit I'd like to go over. The average player will probably have no idea what Sam's mission is at this point, even if they've played through the previous games in the timeline. The TLDR version is, Sam needs to get to the Sirius system. For the full mission briefing, allow me to elaborate further. In Serious Sam 3, Sam entered a mysterious time machine of unknown origin known as the Time Lock. He does this to prevent the world's end, which is now Earth's ultimate fate should Sam fail in this mission. He travels 3,491 years into the past from 2113 AD. Sam is now in 1378 BC at Deir el-Bahri, Egypt. This process sends a shockwave across the universe. Consider we're at a point in history where Mental doesn't know about Earth's existence, let alone Serious Sam. He's got other fish to fry. Fish being the remaining Syrians somewhere in the Sirius system. The Time Lock's shockwave alerted Mental, who then sends in a legion of enemies, along with Ughzan III, to Earth, just in case this incident were to pose a threat to his conquest, which it will. The hordes quickly found and eliminated the remaining Syrians, aka Egyptian gods, as well as the surrounding humans worshipping them. As per how this all occurred before Sam showed up, the theory is that some time has passed between the Time Lock's activation and Sam's arrival. There doesn't seem to be any official explanation for this, though. Okay, you might be a bit confused right now, I don't blame you. There's a more elaborate story regarding how the Syrians came to Earth after first being attacked by Mental. They disguised themselves as Egyptian gods, but were technically an alien species with superior technology. I did write a script about this, but I can't begin to imagine how I'd make it into a video, so if you're curious, I've got a narration of that on my archives channel. It isn't necessary for understanding the rest of this video, so let's continue. Sam is probably himself at this point a bit clueless as to what to do. Thankfully, his implemented Netrixa message board will give him all the instructions he needs. However, a lot of it is riddled by confusing ancient Egyptian lore and metaphors. Unless you're really invested in this story, you'll probably just gloss over the stuff. You don't need to open Netrixa even once to complete the game, which is a bit of an oversight in my opinion, since it's the reason why for so many years, people were confused when you told them that Serious Sam does have a storyline. According to Netrixa, Sam has to find 4 magic elements that are required to enter Thebes. Once collected, he'll enter Karnak, then proceed to a yard in Luxor where the Egyptians would summon their gods, aka Syrians via spaceship. This ship, known as the SSS Enterprise, currently sits on the largest moon of Saturn. Sometime after, the ship will arrive at the Great Pyramid. Sam has to get there in time to climb aboard, which won't be easy, considering that's where Ughzan III is hiding. The SSS Enterprise should be able to take Sam to Mental, where the final battle would begin. And now, back to the trivia. Hatshepsut was, in the alpha stage, meant to take place much further into the game. This was long before there was ever a time lock. And speaking of which, the time lock looks quite a bit different now, compared to its design in Serious Sam 3. Some suggest it's a different timeline. Alternate timelines are, after all, not foreign to this series, thanks to Serious Sam 4, so it's up in the air, really. Sam has decided to ditch his sunglasses, but only once he's arrived in what is destined to be his hottest, most blinding mission yet. Well, at least for the Steam release. You see, in the original retail game, he looked like this. But as a result, he was often compared to Duke Nukem in appearance. Probably in response to that criticism, Croteam removed his shades and gave him a slightly different look overall for the second encounter. In the transition to Steam, Croteam kept his second encounter look. So, what's your favorite timeline? Sunglasses Sam? Or no sunglasses Sam? There are concepts for a classic outfit in Serious Sam 3, which would have made his transition to the first encounter seamless. Guess they felt it didn't fit in well with Serious Sam 3's environment. Was this the better idea? Having trouble deciding myself. Davor Hunsky collected textures for the game for years, plenty of it being from images that he'd taken of real-world locations. Yep, Croteam did this from the very beginning. The original trailer for the game has this awesome tune in the background that nobody's been able to source. Devolver Digital found it for the 2009 Serious Sam HD trailer, so they know what it is, at least. Man, look at how big this environment is! This is groundbreaking stuff for 2001. One of the Serious Engine's cool features is directional light, which allows them to create beautiful, realistic outdoor environments. As you navigate through Hatshepsut, you'll come across a relatively small number of enemies. Nobody here has any idea of who you are, but don't worry, because word spreads as quickly as your bullets do. These are first encounters versions of the beheaded Syrians. What's interesting about the Syrians is that some of them look like this, and some of them look like this. It's been suggested that the Syrian species span across 4 different planets in the Syrian system. My theory is that their look depended on which of the 4 planets they resided on. There's no confirmed answer for this, not publicly anyways. In the Serious Sam 3 feature, I said the Oracle may be part of another species from Sirius, but at the time, I didn't know that there were other planets involved in that takeover. So while my older theory isn't exactly debunked, I think this theory is more likely. Serious Sam Classic may not have the traditional dual wielding that Serious Sam 4 does, but you are able to go back and forth between single and dual Colts. These, much like pistols from any other Sam game, have unlimited ammunition thanks to techno-magical replenishers. The Colts are also the only weapons in the game with a reload function. Should you explore the temple further, you'll probably find these guys. It's Croteam and their friends. Just a funny gag left by the developers, right? Should you let them go on their own path, they'll walk to locations with nearby items that you may otherwise miss, such as this secret rocket launcher. You can find ammo for it on the opposite side. This will be useful if you intend to walk into the desert, where some secret biomechanoid majors spawn. You may think there's no fall damage in this game, but there actually is. It only occurs if the player walks off a tall structure without jumping. Should you jump first, you're good. Here's a hidden feature. If you enable walking speed, Sam won't fall when moving towards the edge of a surface. If you head into the middle floor of the temple, you'll find a couple patrolling enemies that won't be alerted until you've faced them. I believe this is the only instance of it occurring naturally in the first encounter. Be on the lookout for slight differences in wall textures. While this is a bit uncommon, there are instances where this is indicative of a secret. In this case, a double-barreled coach gun. Davor Hunsky told us that the famous Clear enemy was inspired by the Fiends in Quake. Serious Sam uses a lot of stock sound effects, and the classic Clear is full of them. For example, you can hear its same leaping sound effect used in the first second of Michael Jackson's The Way You Make Me Feel. I believe this sound originates from some kind of feline. There's a scrapped secret you can activate to the upper left of this temple by shooting your rockets into this platform. Underneath is a large hole with nothing inside. And that's Hatshepsut. Let's head over to the Sand Canyon. Things are looking a whole lot definition-ier than before. Welcome to 2009 Serious Sam HD. I'd been sent these original in-engine screenshots of the box art recently.
That's fucking disgusting.
Unrelated to Sand Canyon, but 2 test maps for Serious Sam HD, Unfinished Complex and Little Trouble, were reused as deathmatch maps in Serious Sam 3. The famous kamikaze scream has long been suggested to be the recorded voice of Roman Rabarik. However, this isn't true. Specifically, it's a trimmed version of the effect called Scream 4. Wearable ahead. Interesting trivia about this one. Before modifying the game's enemies from the alpha stage, what seems to be the final wearable model can be found as an animated GIF on Croteam's website. The wearable was, in a sense, the Croteam mascot for a couple of years, so my guess is the higher quality model was initially made for that purpose, though eventually fit very well among the other improved enemy models. In Serious Sam HD, enemies will crumble into the ground upon death. Quite different from the classics, where the model vanishes, as a glowing cast of it spins into nothingness. I figured this once had a story-related purpose, such as the body being taken back to Mental's labs for repurposing, but I guess not. The beheaded firecracker enemy no longer holds its useless weapon from Classic. Now it has a small chainsaw, which is a returning idea from the alpha. Also, saw blades were added to the Rocketeer in HD. Now only the bomber is left without a melee attack. In Classic, the bomber's heads are placed in hand. However, in HD, they returned another idea from the alpha, placing a spike where the head is. The bomber is supposed to explode upon death. However, in vanilla Serious Sam HD, this doesn't always happen due to a bug. There's a notoriously difficult to climb hill in Classic, which was greatly improved in HD.
I'm over here, you stupid headless freaks.
This is one of several one-liners that were made as part of a contest that Croteam held on their website prior to the game's release. In HD, you can kill these enemies through the gate, unlike in Classic, where you could only do so by first rocket jumping over it. These enemies are on a timer, so if you kill them early, the next room will have enemies waiting for you, such as the Marsh Hopper, which use the same sounds as the Catman from In the Flesh or Serious Sam's Alpha. These creatures were added quite late into the game's development. Shortly before release, they had a different texture, which can be seen in the retail manual. Many don't understand what the Hopper's actually doing when it attacks you. Nitrixa explains that they're actually overinflating themselves, then, as they explode, toxic slime from their intestines cover the player, which causes damage. This room is where the air element was supposed to be. Nitrixa tells us that it's been moved further up to a small tomb. The behavior of harpies was much different in Serious Sam 1 compared to 2, 3, and 4. They follow the player's position, rather than occasionally swiping down to scratch the player. In concept, we can see that the harpies used to have pupils. Biomechanoids are created in Mental's labs, using some form of modified Marsh Hopper DNA. Devor Hunsky has said that its design was inspired by some fish-like robot creature from a role-playing game. While I've never heard it mentioned, surely there was also a connection to the ED-209 from RoboCop. That's Sand Canyon. On to the tomb of Ramses III. Oh lord, I'm in VR. Yeah, that was my original intention for this level, but it never really turned out well in practice. So let's just use 2017's Fusion release instead. It's pretty much the same thing anyways. It's been suggested that the level's spooky ambiance was inspired by John Carpenter's Halloween. Ever wonder about the significance of Ramses III? He was the last of the great pharaohs. Many feel this level's visuals were butchered in the transition to HD, which applies here in Fusion as well. In Classic, there was a greater emphasis on lighting, which made each room distinguishable. But in HD, most of the rooms appear identically to one another in style. In Fusion, they've added new alternating run animations for the Gunnar. I don't believe Croteam ever explained why, but it does make them more intimidating in virtual reality. In the released game, we only visit one tomb, but initially, this was part of a much bigger level in the alpha called King Valley, wherein you would also visit the Tomb of Menes, and what was called the Secret Tomb. A common speedrunning trick is to continuously jump on top of flying Gunars to make great heights. This ability was removed from future revisions of the game. Something else you won't see anymore are the Gunar's morphing limbs, which did a great job in Classic, showing their transition from grounded to flying. The feature itself isn't available in future Sirius engines, so instead, floating Gunars will just float around with no explanation for it. Yeah, not too much to say about Tomb of Ramses III, so let's go to the Valley of the Kings. I guess this is fine for the Palm OS. This HUD looks a little different, and the Rocketeers are more blue than purple. Wait, this isn't the classic shotgun. Right, so this is the 2002 Xbox port, or at least a mod for PC that converts the Xbox contents over. This was a unique release of the game with a couple new features, such as, for example, enhanced enemy and weapon models, and, as mentioned, a new HUD featuring the Boinklet font. There's also this awesome combo system, and less than admired lives system. The port was developed at the same time as Second Encounter, containing both missions, much like Serious Sam Gold for PC, although that PC release had none of the Xbox enhancements, but included a standalone fan-made campaign called The Dark Island. Valley of the Kings represents the alpha's King Valley level. In the final game, you start this level in the valley, but it only lasts for a few minutes, because the majority will be spent inside the Chambers of Horus. Ah, multi-kills. You'd achieve this by firing one time, and in doing so killing multiple enemies. Hearing that cymbal clash brings with it a small hit of dopamine. Here's a kamikaze hitching a ride on a werebull. Fun gimmick, which appears to be broken in future releases of the game. This is the only time that it happens in the series. The major biomechs behave very similarly to their minor counterparts, unlike in future games where the two are far more distinct. Did you know that according to concept art, they were once green? Oh, I forgot the two of them spawn here. I'm probably gonna die now. Wow, I actually survived that.
Frogs.
Oh, another feature from the Xbox. In the first encounter portion, you get immediate access to a second encounter weapon, the chainsaw. This thing takes down marsh hoppers like nobody's business. Before entering the chambers, we encounter the very first boss fight, a Highlander reptiloid. Chances are that it'll destroy a nearby statue, which activates a text prompt. We've got 4 more of these to destroy, but for what reason? We'll get there shortly.
This is getting serious.
This is a save game toll booth. In the Xbox release, you could use this to save your game mid-level, then return at any time. In this room, you need to push 2 buttons to lower this pillar, then collect the Ankh hovering above it to enter the next room. In Classic, which also applies for Xbox, the physics are a bit strange, so you only need to press 1 button, then correctly time a jump up this slope, and the Ankh is yours. Alternatively, you could just rocket jump up there, but in the Xbox port, rocket jumping is disabled. On PC, this area requires you to kill 2 spawning Gunars to open a door, but on Xbox, there is no door. Perhaps this is done to increase visibility of the next statue that we'll destroy. Note the slippery floor mirror. Cool, huh? Oh yeah, and this is Sam's Xbox model. According to an old X-Play preview, his model was changed to be more complex in order to use motion capture hardware for the game's cutscenes. He would go on to look this way for a couple of years, up until the release of Serious Sam HD. Seems to me that this design was inspired by a cover concept that was made during the alpha development. Collect this scroll, then check Natrixa to be informed about a secret level called Moon Mountains. How do you get there? Well, here on the Xbox, you have to destroy the 5 statues. Then, once you finish the level, you're sent there automatically. However, on the PC version, once the level is finished, you can either walk across this bridge to fall into the next level, or activate this secret pendulum to safely make it to the entrance of Moon Mountains. Wait, what do you mean by Wall of Darkness? Is that it? Okay. Very scary. Holy crap!
Bye-bye!
Wait, what? Really? Invisible Gunnar? This time you've gone too far, Mental. This near-final sequence is a bit complicated. You have to press a button on the left to prevent spikes from falling on the right, where underneath is an Ankh. This is actually symbolic of bowing down to worship the nearby statue, then sanctifying myself by bathing in this holy water. It was a ritual that the Egyptians would perform, but my dumbass was just like, wee!
Jesus Christ, Sam, do you have to blow everything up?
As a matter of fact.
Wee! I'd like to bring attention to Natrixa for a second, regarding how its messages are written in a seemingly personalized manner. Makes it seem human, very much unlike Serious Sam 3 or 4. In the game's now non-canonical sequel, they personified Natrixa into a Cortana knockoff from Halo. Until Serious Sam 2 flopped, Natrixa was a sentient character. Very strange. Here's one of them wacky Xbox cutscenes.
Hey!
It's more in line with Serious Sam 2.
Damn B-movie props.
The Xbox port was sort of a bridging gap between them at the time. These days, this is reflected on as an alternate timeline. Now on to the game's first secret level, Moon Mountains.
I hate it when this happens.
The Moon Mountains aren't the only mysterious thing here. After all this talk, welcome to Serious Sam's Alpha. If for this level you notice that the camera movement is a bit jittery, my apologies. This build has its mouse sensitivity locked at an uncomfortably high value. In the Alpha, there's a neat secondary knife function that went scrapped. You can swipe traditionally, or perform a stabbing move to jib small enemies. No purpose for it, which is no doubt why it was scrapped. Might have had more meaning for In the Flesh, a game which apparently allowed you to separate limbs. Gross. Behold the buff Sam 2000 model. And these slope physics, which are fittingly more broken than the final games. Have you ever seen the Alpha Firecracker's disturbing head texture? Turns out it originates from some kind of Halloween mask. The exact source itself remains unknown. Here's the wildly different Alpha design of a clear. The C4 weapon from Serious Sam 3 was likely inspired by the Alpha's pipe bomb, which sadly never made it into the final game. Other scrapped weapons include the Ghostbuster and Lava Rock's gun, the latter of which was reportedly removed for its similarity to the laser gun. Perhaps the pipe bomb was removed because it was similar to the grenade launcher. Oops, here I go. Oh hey, Fishman! Here's one scrapped enemy among its many others. These guys shoot some type of blue projectile at you, which is easy to dodge. In the same fashion as Gunnars that fly are being partially visible, some fishmen are capable of transitioning between sea and land. Sure are a lot of them down here. That's another thing about the Alpha. It's as if enemies are put on a multiplier sometimes. The Alpha's gameplay focuses on mass amounts of enemies, without much consideration for any sort of weapon swapping formula. Most enemies can be taken out with any medium-tier weapon quite easily. The whole thing tends to feel repetitive, which I feel is a testament to how important the last year of development was. The Alpha had longer death animations for the beheaded, which is a feature that made its way back into Serious Sam 3 with the cloned soldiers. Flying Gunnars, despite being rather uncommon in the final game, are overused in the Alpha. Seriously, it's like a 5-to-1 with regular Gunnar spawns. Very bizarre. No better time to mention that, at a certain point in the Alpha's development, Gunnars were able to shoot electric projectiles towards the player from their hands. See this triangle of armor shards? The Alpha has many strange item placements like this. Some instances can be found in the final game as well, like for example this circle of health pills in the Chambers of Horus. Many indoor environments look quite nice. Here you can see brick walls covered in vines and aesthetically pleasing flame graphics. Seems like the harpies aren't very fast in the Alpha. The level pretty much ends here, safe for a lift on the side that'll take you back up should you fall. In every other release of the game, there's no water underneath this area, just a bottomless pit. There's nothing too valuable down here. I assume this was removed because it wasted the player's time. Should you continue down this path, you'll find that the Alpha version of Moon Mountains has a second act. This area was remade for a secret level in Serious Sam Revolution's Bright Island campaign. From here, canonically, Sam finds a stream and swims down to an oasis. I believe this is now considered the worst way of playing Serious Sam HD, with its compressed graphics, audio, and jumpy frame rate, but I've played far worse console ports, and so have you, probably. A combined physical release of Serious Sam HD was made for consoles called the Gold Edition. It was never released in North America, but we did get the eventual Serious Sam collection. Interesting bit of trivia is that on the box art, you can see the second encounter Zumble enemy using its HD beta model. So when playing the 360 port, be sure to turn off auto-aim. That is unless you want your rockets to soar in unplanned directions. Oasis is unique in that it lets you go at your own pace. There are plenty of pickups around, most of them spawning in hordes of monsters. Is the trade-off worth it? You decide. After all, you can just barrel towards the temple and skip everything if you like, though that's not without a punishing battle first. There's a couple screenshots from Serious Sam HD's beta that show this level in what appears to be morning light rather than midday. It's frankly beautiful, which makes it sad that I doubt we'll ever see it in action. I don't intend to cover every secret, as you probably guessed already, but here's one that you shouldn't miss: the minigun. If you don't get it here, you'll have to wait another 4 levels. Collecting the minigun is a bit strange. You have to pick up this pill. Be prepared for the Biomech Major. Collect the other on the opposite side. Then destroy this statue, jump on the bouncer, and collect your minigun.
Let's get serious.
Is what he says now. Prior to Steam re-releases, he can be heard saying the following line instead.
All right, who wants some?
No idea why they changed it. Time for the second boss fight, the Marsh Hopper Horde. I've always felt the theme that plays here was meant to represent a bunch of croaking frogs. I want to believe that was intentional, because I was rolling with laughter when I first heard it some 15 years ago. You might be wondering how these useful items are being spawned in for Sam. Well, the leading theory is that this stuff's being sent back to him from the future. A future where Sam corrects the timeline, and presumably defeats Mental. Science fiction, am I right? Now it's time for the fan-favorite level, Dunes. Whoa, is this the Serious Sam HD beta? Well, that depends on how you look at it. These are indeed beta assets from the 2015 Motherload. They've been imported to Serious Sam Fusion. Kinga Ass and Danny S did a lot of hard work making this level in particular resemble the beta as closely as possible. Huge thank you to the both of them. So what's different about the HD beta? For one, it uses improved weapon models from the original Xbox port, which I always thought was neat. Most enemies have earlier models with slight to major differences. This includes different animations as well. For example, Kamikazes reuse their Xbox animation. Clears don't always break apart like they do in the released game. Here there's an actual death animation for non-explosive weapons. How about this early minor arachnoid texture? Weird. The Dunes map in the beta is significantly brighter, which can actually be said about a couple different levels from this time. Dunes is a thing of beauty. The combat is very formulaic, and features the biggest, flattest environment that I can think of in all of Serious Sam 1. This gives the player complete visibility of the area. Yet despite this, because of the carefully thought out spawns, there's really no safe place to be. You'll need to use your wits. And how could I forget that this level has the most memorable track of the series, which has essentially become Serious Sam's leitmotif. By the way, Sam now has all 4 elements, and that's not a good thing for Mental. Whether they're aware of it or not, the hordes will push you harder than ever before. It really is no surprise that Dunes remains the favorite of many. One of this level's secrets involves a massive horde of harpies. Sadly, they don't gather as closely in HD as they do in Serious Sam Classic, thus you may want to start this off with the Tommy gun, but in Classic, I strongly encourage use of the grenade launcher here. I think the werebulls are drunk. Oh shit, it's the Pulsator!
Pulsator, 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 pulsator!
Okay, it's actually the laser gun. In the original release of First Encounter, this laser gun weapon used the same sound as a TIE fighter from Star Wars. Now entering Suburbs.
Yeah!
In March 2019, A homebrewer by the name of Skyrimus ported Serious Sam to Android using the source code that Croteam released in 2016. How can I capture Android gameplay? Using this weird Powkitty X18S handheld. For some reason, despite the game sounding fine on its own, the video capture sounded like this. And I'm not even gonna fix that because I think it's pretty funny. By default, the HUD uses the second encounter color scheme. I imported the Xbox models simply because I like them better, and honestly I'm just booting this thing up for the first time in a full year and haven't changed anything. Oh god, the input lag. I'm willing to bet that's the Powkitty's fault rather than the port. Sadly, there isn't much trivia to mention about Suburbs. It resembles, who would have guessed it, Egyptian suburbs. And it does a good job at that, I guess. We have a few screenshots of an earlier Suburbs level, which shows some differences to the map layout. I've noticed the reptiloids blend in very well with palm trees, which I figure was intended. They're often spawned at the same height, which can create a lot of confusion. These guys bled green in the classics, but red in HD. How sad. Reptiloids used to have a different walking animation. It appears similar to the one they'd eventually use in Serious Sam HD, which might not be a coincidence. One noteworthy thing to mention about Suburbs is that it's one of the few levels in the game where you have multiple ways of approaching the combat. Different paths spawn different enemies. It's relatively easy to skip certain spawns though. You can even rocket jump out of the play zone and proceed to the second area without much trouble. Fun. That was miserable. Input lag with jerky camera controls on the hard difficulty? Yikes. Anyways, on to the weakest level in the game. Sewers. Yeah, maybe the weakest level, but it's still alright. Here we are in Serious Sam Revolution, the community-driven release of the classics, which was meant to unify and modernize the experience with proper widescreen, workshop support, and a standalone campaign called Bright Island. What else to say about Revolution? Well, the Tommy gun has an arm now, much like HD. Let's start Sewers with one of the game's greatest pieces of trivia, which is the fact that this level's entire existence is because of a comment made by George Broussard prior to release. So, Roman Rebark initially denied the existence of a sewer level. To quote him, "You won't need to go to the brightness or contrast buttons in our game, or your money back guaranteed." And by the words of Old Man Murray's Eric Wolpaw, Serious Sam recaptures the intensity of wild action shooters, but in full, brightly lit, sewerless 3D. At the time, this was said sincerely. But then, George Broussard, who was reportedly saying bad things about Serious Sam at the time, said he would cut it out if the Serious engine could allow for dark, closed, impossible to see anything sewer-ish levels. According to Croteam, it was, quote, worth it to sacrifice one level for George to shut up. Still waiting on that money-back guarantee, though. George Broussard also said that he'd accept a nickname of Gnar if Croteam managed to pull this off. And thus, in Serious Sam 2, a goofy journalist character was named after him called George B. Gnar. For some reason, Serious Sam Revolution has different view models by default. Don't know why. These attributes can be put into the console individually to faithfully restore them to the normal position. For the video though, I'll leave the default values. This level is known for its introduction to the electrofish. However, this isn't actually the first time you can see them. They're also available to spawn in Valley of the Kings, should you fall into the first Chambers of Horus pool and collect a health pickup. Might as well mention how, like the Marsh Hopper, the electrofish had a more grayish appearance prior to release, with murky yellow eyes. It too is found like this in the retail manual. The electrofish is essentially the final game's replacement of the Alpha's Fishman. At one point, an anonymous fan sent me a modified version of the second public test, which contained a lot of scrapped elements from the game. Why is this relevant? Well, considering the first fight in this level features a major arachnoid, I might as well take the opportunity to show you the next evolution that we never saw. The Elder Arachnoid. What's so special about the Elder, you ask? Not too much. It's just the next evolution from a major. Bigger, stronger, and more damaging.
Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier and welcome to Five Nights at...
Yeah, I guess I left a certain mod installed from whenever I last played this. Just before the deep dive sequence, you'll be able to find greener marsh hoppers. Another Sam Mega fan, Serious Sacor, believes this is an ambient bias for enemies, which wasn't used very often in the game. This didn't transfer over to HD, in fact they removed them as early as the Xbox port. Speaking of that port, over there, you don't have to flip a switch underwater to unlock the first door, as it's already open. There were a lot of user-friendly tweaks for this one, another example being the added visibility underwater, probably because that poke at George Broussard was no longer mandatory. Alright, let's get out of this dump. Metropolis is next.
Looks like it leads to the surface.
Frame, what's this unhealthy obsession with Serious Sam on the Xbox? It's so colorful. Then Serious Sam 3 happened. Anyways, this is the actual Xbox port. Note the 4:3 aspect ratio. I'll be playing it on an Xbox 360. This introduces some graphical funkiness since it's using imperfect emulation, but there's no major problems here. Very playable indeed. I found a couple screenshots of the port when it was still in development. This was prior to the creation of its exclusive models. Perhaps at one point it was meant to be a more direct port, although you can still see a lives counter here. There's also some pictures of an earlier HUD before the final one was implemented. The lives counter at this time shows the second encounter model of Sam, rather than his final one. Metropolis introduces an interesting gimmick, where if the player chooses the serious difficulty, the skybox changes to brighter daylight. This is also the case with the following level, Alley of the Sphinxes. So what you can take from that is, on serious difficulty, Sam makes it through the sewers faster, I guess. Beheaded bombers take a bit longer to explode on Xbox. To be more specific though, their death animation isn't as short. Oh lord! I'm okay. So kamikazes stay stunned for slightly longer here. These were the days of hand-holding on console FPS. This did not translate into later console ports, even though, ironically, I think the original Xbox version feels better to play than the later Xbox 360 release. Camera control in particular is a lot smoother. Uh-oh, I'm cornered. Well, it's the Xbox version. The chainsaw makes these moments of panic a lot easier to manage. That's a nice rate of fire you got there. It'd be a shame if the game's tick rate affected it. This is an infamous classic bug where, after an hour and 8 minutes of play, the laser gun and Tommy gun's firing rate slows down. Also the flamethrower in second encounter. So how can you fix it? Edit the source code, or just wait another hour and 8 minutes. Simple. If you're curious why this happens, there's a video out there by Decino who explains it in great detail. Well, no better time to use my spare. Serious Sam Xbox, in addition to the chainsaw, also gives you the Serious Bomb early, which is otherwise introduced in the second encounter. In terms of classic, only on Xbox does it have a selectable weapon slot. Moments later, I collected this secret cannon, another weapon hidden behind a mistextured wall. Very useful in an upcoming werewolf fight. Croteam made this level the finale for the Xbox's first episode. This is why, at the end of the level, a boss fight from the following stage, Alley of the Sphinxes, is pushed back. When all's said and done, Sam collects the Sign of Amun-Ra, which will be used to summon the SSS Enterprise. There are several different outcomes here, depending on which version of the game you're playing. On PC, Sam grabs it at the end of the level, then walks through the desert into the Alley of the Sphinxes. Here on Xbox, it's guarded by a friendly magical surfboard. Sam then rides it to the Alley of the Sphinxes. In the eventual Legend of the Beast DLC, the sign was moved further to the Grand Obelisk by a group called the Children of Amun-Ra. These guys are mentioned once more in Serious Sam's Siberian Mayhem. So I guess whatever timeline Legend of the Beast fits into, Siberian Mayhem is a part of it? Oh yeah, so Legend of the Beast takes place just after Metropolis. Guess we'll have to talk about it for a moment. A moment is really all it deserves. What do I mean by that? Well, this DLC is notorious for being cheap and likely rushed. Which is weird because one could only call it late for being released after Serious Sam 3. Nobody expected this. It pretty much came out of nowhere. Some leftover text in HD suggests that the DLC was originally called The Lost Levels. This is referring to its use of 3 existing maps from the Serious Sam Alpha. For the most part, the gameplay has been completely uprooted here. One of the weirdest things the Legend of the Beast does is introduce enemies from future releases without a proper introduction. The Zumble? It's from second encounter, so what's it doing here? Chronological players are gonna end up asking,
What the fuck is this?
And then there's the Ram God, which is a Knoom? From Serious Sam 3? This DLC is just a bunch of weirdness. Most will suggest you simply avoid it and continue with the main game with Alley of the Sphinxes. There's more I could say about Legend of the Beast, but nothing I haven't said already, so check out my dedicated video on the DLC from a few years ago, if interested. Well, that's enough of that. You already know what comes next. Alley of the Sphinxes. Is it just me, or did things get a lot better looking around here? This is Serious Sacor's Seriously Stupid HD Remaster, self-titled. Originally, Serious Sam HD changed the level from sunset to nighttime. Sacor wanted to restore the feeling of fantasy to the game, so he revitalized the red sunset look seen in Classic on its easy and normal difficulties. There are many other subtle changes, like added grass, rocks, and terrain bumps. I'll let you discover that for yourself though. After all, it's a free mod that anyone can try in Serious Sam Fusion. Here in Alley of the Sphinxes, there's usually a single column off into the distance, which the player would likely never find, since after a certain point off the intended path, the player begins to take damage. Nobody knows why the column is there, possibly a mistake? In Sacor's Remaster, he replaced it with a very clever Easter egg.
Look at the size of that thing! Owned!
Earlier in development, the cannon had a secondary ammo type. This was the nuke ball. I can use a semi-broken version of it in this modified version of the second public test. Essentially, Sam would light the fuse, launch the ball, then wait a few seconds to find it exploding near a dozen times, causing great harm to anything close by. Hey, that wasn't straight. What? FrameRater complaining about the Fusion bug issue 327. Just a reminder, this is a bug introduced in Fusion where projectiles fired at point blank can fly off wildly in another direction. This makes combination kills with the cannon very tricky. As a result, I've wasted these shots and now have to fight these wearable using my double-barreled shotgun, as I've run out of other ammunition. Very likely to happen to first-time players here, who may begin to underestimate the cannon's usefulness. I should mention that this can also occur when using the rocket launcher. Where the fuck did that rocket go? What?
What? What was that?
Fusion!
In Serious Sam Revolution exclusively, off to the side here, you can collect the secret Ghostbuster weapon. As mentioned earlier, this was scrapped from Serious Sam's Alpha. In Classic, if you let this demonstration play through the whole way, Sam will say,
Just what the hell was that anyway?
Sacor has an interesting theory that perhaps a lava golem sound was meant to play prior to the line, hinting at the upcoming boss fight.
Just what the hell was that anyway?
They removed this line entirely for Serious Sam HD, but Sacor restored it in his remaster. When you finish the level, a cutscene shows the Generous Yard area. The player should keep this in mind before starting the next level, Karnak. Now we're in Public Test 1, a demo that marks the very first release of Serious Sam. As such, there are numerous differences. But first, immediately walk backwards to enter the Generous Yard. You can pick up weapons in here, which you'll find are mostly using alpha models.
Incoming message, incoming message, incoming message.
Yeah, that's annoying. The Karnak we're running now has a different set of spawns and time of day change. However, the map's layout is identical. In the final game, the skybox shows the Flame Nebula, an emission nebula located in the constellation of Orion. It's visible in several of the game's skyboxes, including the pit in the second encounter. The other nebula in the sky is a recolored Eagle Nebula. This level was a benchmark for progress throughout the game's development, which was used many times to demonstrate what their engine was capable of to the public. So, the knife? It sucks in this build. It takes multiple swings to kill anything, and the damage it inflicts is shortly delayed, so you'll need to prepare before using it. Pretty much worthless. Many enemies like the Clears and Harpies haven't changed much, if at all, since the alpha. The Public Test's beheaded crew looks similar to their final design, despite minor differences. However, shortly before this, Rocketeers were shirtless, and Bombers were camo in appearance. Another noteworthy difference in the Public Test are the health, armor, and ammo pickups, which are mostly in boring gray. Ever wonder why the obelisk in Karnak's thumbnail isn't there in the game? Well, it actually is, but it sinks into the floor immediately as you start. Why? Probably to make space for the kamikaze fight. This is only the case in the demo, because in the final version of Karnak, the obelisk stays as the kamikaze fight is replaced, much like other spawns. On the Xbox port, Karnak was split into two parts. First Karnak, followed by the Yonk Pool. Xbox has the only version of Karnak where you can see the obelisk during the day. The arachnoid sure looks funny in this build. Looks like a bunch of red blobs pulled together. No doubt intended as a placeholder. Multi-directional gravity was something Croteam were pretty proud of at the time. This feature only exists in classic versions of the game. Their newer engine doesn't support it, and if they wanted to implement it, they'd have to rewrite the engine around it. An excessive amount of work for the very few times that the game actually makes use of it. Take a look at this undulating reflective blob. It's referred to internally as Mental's eye drop. However, no significance to this in the game's story has been documented. It's the big oof boy himself, the Biomech Major in its public test form. Earlier, Biomechs were just gray. This is the first time one was actually shown in color. That's its wound sound from the alpha, which doesn't actually play to my recollection, so it went unused. However, I like to use it. Serious Sam HD had a similar one-liner contest to the original first encounter. So a couple new lines were added to the game, such as this one.
Samicide!
Ammunition isn't all that scarce until you reach the final fight, where I swear they don't give you enough to complete it. I always end up stuck with the Colts. Oh, by the way, Sam uses the same alpha model in the public test. Let's take a look at some media released between the first and second public tests. First, we have some kind of shrine environment. This area is completely foreign to anything in the final game, or pre-release content that we're aware of. Some have suggested that it's just a simple test room. After all, there doesn't appear to be much to it. We have a low-quality image of the Dunes level, which I just find interesting. The Tommy gun went from using the alpha model to this variant. The laser gun had a rougher paint job, and what might be a non-functional charger input? The grenade launcher looked like this. Minor biomechs, even after the final model was made, managed to hold on to their gray look for a while. Curiously, their laser cannons were green instead of blue. The juvenile arachnoids may have been somewhat darker at this time. They don't look to be their traditional orange color. There is this one earlier concept image of the arachnoids, so there's a good chance that's what we're looking at here. While we're at it, might as well take a brief look at the second public test. They performed a 180 on that crappy knife, which now works similarly to the final game. Except, yeah, for some reason now the jibs fly at a great distance away from the impact. The rocket launcher's model may be final, but the explosion sound isn't. The final model clears using an alpha animation will catch you off guard. A similar reaction comes from seeing walking kamikazes in this area. The voice actor of Serious Sam, John J. Dick, redid his lines before the final game was released.
Hey! Hey! Let's get serious. Let's get serious. Let's rock and roll. Let's rock and roll.
Similarly, you can hear an earlier version of the "It's all fun and games" quote after exiting the final Serious Sam demo.
Yeah, it's all fun and games until somebody loses an eye. Yeah, it's all fun and games until somebody loses an eye.
That was a long one. Now entering Luxor. Grab that SN30 Pro Plus. Joy-Cons are okay if there's no drift, but this is much better. Special Reserve Games did a limited physical edition of the Serious Sam collection in October 2022, but I didn't get it because I've got enough already.
Holy shit, bro. What you got there?
Box of Sam?
Proud to admit that I no longer smoke this much. Anyways, Atlassian got the special release and sent me some pictures of its contents. It may look fancy at first, but there's nothing here we haven't seen before. The manual is extra lazy, made up of mostly promotional art. Only 2 of the 28 pages qualify as instructions, so I don't even know how they can call it an instruction booklet. Here we are in Luxor, Switch Collection, digital release. It's basically Serious Sam Fusion on consoles. Good time to talk about Fusion again. While much of Fusion makes the game better, certain things have greatly affected the experience. There's another infamous bug in Fusion where, if an enemy is within melee attack range, it's possible for them to start suddenly teleporting next to you. I really don't mean to be such a negative Nancy, but I have to talk about this weapon wheel on the Switch Collection. Why are the icons so tiny? I can barely make them out on my set. You can see that I selected the minigun there, so where is it? Really frustrating. Honestly though, With the exception of fusion bugs and that dang weapon wheel, the collection is fine. Performance itself is solid. You can break a lot of Luxor's puzzles by rocket jumping. I tend to do this on my own playthroughs because, well, Luxor is pretty long and samey. Not today, clear. Wow. That doesn't look right. The center price is now on its way to the Great Pyramid. The final arena requires you to collect 4 onks hidden among the columns. Then you're to place them by the obelisk to open the door. To make things easier, here's a map. Remember it and you'll never be lost again. When exiting Luxor, be absolutely sure not to walk directly forward into the exit. That is, unless you want to miss the secret Sacred Yards level. Look to your left, there's another door. Let's take a look behind it. Welcome to the Sacred Yards. Welcome to the Sacred Yards in HD, sort of? This is a rather ambitious mod that brought a lot of HD's flair over to the classic game. It's called Serious Sam Plus by Vitek and JD. Always thought the choice of music for their trailer was peculiar. Attempting to install it on an English PC gives you a lot of and most importantly, Guess I'll start with the 14-year-long undiscovered secret. You heard that right. So there's a method of completing this level quickly without fighting a single enemy. This was discovered by Solace, who was having a talk with Croteam CEO, Roman Rebark. Solace mentioned how this level has a weird string of triggers, which Rebark suggested he investigate further. And that led to the discovery. I'd walk you through how to do this, but it's a bit complex and touchy. There are plenty of guides out there for it though. The secret was first activated by collecting something called the Silent Pill. On Xbox, it was replaced by a not-so-silent pill. In other words, it just don't work here. Figured I should at least make a mention of the available blood options. Pretty fun, isn't it? It's good for letting your kids play, or, well, just fun in games, I guess. They've added a new sound for the single shotgun. For some reason. Sacred Yards is the only level in First Encounter with scaled enemies. It starts with Pinky here.
Please, don't hurt me.
And no, there is no Pinky lore.
Oh my god, you killed Pinky.
He's just a small dude. Both Sphinx rooms can more or less be bypassed. On the left side, shoot a rocket at the ascending platform to destroy it, then pick up the Sphinx. This challenge is timed. If you wait for the platform to settle, it won't work. On the right, jump onto this switch, then climb through the gap, and the second Sphinx is yours. Sacred Yards and Karnak are the only 2 levels in First Encounter that make use of multi-directional gravity. Why would they barely use a function that would have taken so much work to create? Well, here's my theory. In the alpha, there were a lot of empty levels later into the game that made use of this. So, I think this was never meant to be used too much, if at all, in the earlier parts that make up the first and second encounters. The planned third encounter, where you'd visit the ruins of Syrian civilizations, might have ended up taking better advantage of this. But sadly, this never happened. Several pre-release screenshots of the Sacred Yards demonstrate a frequent time of day change. Given the following level's environment, I think sunset would have been more appropriate.
Please, mister, do not go in there. You will ruin our secret.
Okay, I know there's a lot to take in here. These guys represent Old Man Murray. You remember, it's the old site that saved Serious Sam from extinction, theoretically. Eric Wolpaw often poked fun at Roman Rebark for not knowing what the English word crate translated to. Croteam had a good sense of humor then, so created this entire pyramid built of crates.
Take cover, it's gonna blow!
Guarded by the old men themselves.
Look at that moron, he really pressed the button!
You can even see the Old Man Murray logo on their vehicle. Rebark has since commented on the secret after release. This one's from me, saying thanks for the crate prank you pulled on me in our first interview. Thank you very much. Finally, it's time for Sam to unite with the SSS Center Price in the Great Pyramid. So, Which version of the first encounter will I be playing for the game's final level? That's a good question. It was going to be on my Mac until the signal started to cut out every 20 seconds. Well, you know what they say. Nothing beats the original. You can skip this first arena with a grenade and rocket, but it's not easy to do, and will likely take you several tries to accomplish. No fusion bug here. Now I can easily line up the wearables with my cannon. This is how it's done. There he is! The final form of Ugzan III reportedly made its way into existence less than 3 months before the game's release. His model is an evolution of the Devil enemy from the Alpha. In that build, his appearance changed depending on the location. Nobody knows how or why, but in one scene of a 2007 anime called Hayate the Combat Butler, there happens to be a heavily modified Ugzan model. Maybe Croteam was selling off some assets? Should you die in the presence of Ugzan, if you wait a couple seconds, you'll hear him laughing at your demise. There's a countdown timer above the pyramid door. This shows how much time is left before it opens. What's neat here is that it's actually written in binary. And did you know it plays sounds? These sounds were removed in Serious Sam HD. We're now on our way to fight Mental.
Geronimo!
I sure hope nothing strange happens on the way. What's next? The second encounter, right? Well, I promised for this series of features to have 3 parts. I don't advertise this often because it doesn't resonate with many, but I'm not much of a second encounter fan. It has its moments for sure, some of the best in the series I would debate. But would I make a whole feature-length video about it? Not on my own terms. It'd just be for completionist's sake. Nonetheless, we could easily stop here and wouldn't miss out on much by doing so. In summary, the SSS Enterprise crashes into Central America, so Sam's back on Earth to fight more of Mental's hordes. Once again, he'll need to find his way off Earth in order to confront Mental. In closing, the second encounter ends very similarly to how the first encounter does. The idea I have currently is to leave this feature video as it is, and cover the second encounter in a separate, bite-sized video. Maybe I'll call it the second encounter featurette or something like that. I'm sure this isn't the preferred outcome to many, but it's the most realistic idea for me going forward. I guess that wraps things up. Thanks for watching the Serious Sam feature series.